The United States federal government should increase diplomatic and economic engagement with the People's Republic of China that invites them to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership, making clear to the Chinese government that they are not excluded, they can meet standards, and they are encouraged to apply for membership. There are a few arguments for this. For example, containment. China is not currently in the Trans-Pacific Partnership now. That's Wang 2016. TPP does not include China, which is the world's largest exporter. There is no sign that the People's Republic of China will be a part of the TPP anytime soon. And China explicitly sees TPP as an element of containment. Take them at their word. That's Indonesia 2016. China has warned the US not to politicize TPP. The ministry spokesman urged countries to avoid leading people to the conclusion that the US has been promoting the TPP out of political consideration. The US-led initiative is widely seen by Beijing as Obama's doctrine of China's military and economic containment. So there's one scenario for this: war. Conflicting signals undermine relations. Explicitly inviting China in ensures small problems don't escalate to major conflict and ruin overall cooperation. That's Posen 14. Outreach is required, not just to keep things from escalating, but to maintain the economic relationship. A potential key to both would be to integrate China into the TPP. The economic benefits are clear. It would be a win-win-win. This underestimates the productivity benefits to China of making high-standard trade reforms. There are hesitations on both sides of the Pacific about having China. Those groups are missing the point. TPP is an example of open regionalism. It is in every country in the region's interest to have China be a part of this high-quality agreement. It makes the agreement more likely to be accepted and meaningful if it bridges the US, China, and Japan. A TPP that takes China into account would serve US foreign policy and economic interests. Even if China cannot join immediately, knowing it was en route to joining would give it a significant voice. A practical step would be for the US to explicitly and publicly invite China to the TPP. By giving China an explicit and open observer status in TPP, the Chinese government would find its own self-interest to play fairly. Deeper integration can act as a counterweight to escalating overreaction to and spillover of manageable tensions. An open China serves both Chinese reform and American interests. So that moves on to a war with China could go nuclear. That's straight times 2K. Conflict would embroil other countries and raise the possibility of a nuclear war. If China were to retaliate, East Asia will be set on fire. Russia may seek to redefine Europe's political landscape. India and Pakistan, armed with its own nuclear arsenal, could enter a dangerous phase. There's little hope of winning a war against China, short of using nuclear weapons. Beijing seems prepared to go for the nuclear option. While nuclear Armageddon might seem inconceivable, it cannot be ruled out, for China puts sovereignty above everything. The second scenario to this is a warming scenario. First, declining relations cause war and ruin climate change solutions. That's Ash 15. What is the biggest challenge? How to deal with China? The relationship is the greatest geopolitical question. If Washington and Beijing do not get it right, there will probably be war. The next decade. Putin and Islamic State are medium regional challenges by comparison. Climate change and the world economy cannot be managed without American-Chinese cooperation. And warming is real and causes extinction. It is comparatively more dangerous than nuclear war. That's Dibble 7. The threat of global warming has passed through probability to near certainty. Not one of more than 900 articles doubted anthropogenic warming. NASA scientists concluded warming is estimated to contribute 150,000 deaths and 5 million illnesses each year. As disease spreads, accelerating towards 400 ppm, by 2050 they will reach 500. There is no way to immediately reduce the levels, only to slow their increase. 1 to 2 degree warming increases more violent storms, the spread of disease, mass die-offs of plants and animals, species extinctions, and threatened inundation of low-lying countries. Ice sheets disintegrate. Runaway greenhouse warming is caused by and causes hotter temperatures. We're going to burn everything. Global warming is the post-Cold War era's equivalent of a nuclear winter, and better supported scientifically. It puts dangers from terrorism and traditional military challenges to shame. It is a threat to life. Now, it may sound like everything's bad, but we have a way to solve for this. First, diplomatic negotiations over TPP mistrust spill over into broader strategic relations, managing an array of critical cooperation issues. That's ZO 14. China and the US must build strategic trust to develop co-op in a number of areas. China has been suspicious of the US pivot, and TPP China views these policies as methods to contain China's rise. the U.S. sees China as taking an assertive stance. This aggression, coupled with close encounters, has left the U.S. unable to decipher China's intentions. China's behavior is perceived by the U.S. as raising risk of conflict. If the two countries can sit down for an honest discussions and agree that the parties are not engaged in a zero-sum game and that peaceful co-op can clear confusions about intentions, the two powers could reach consensus on a number of issues. The two sides could cooperate on a common strategic vision for the Asia-Pacific. There's a wide range of issues the U.S. and China can work together to address, such as North Korea, climate change, terrorism, and disease.
How will China reach TPP standards?
Well, they run themselves like a country. They make reforms.
How many reforms will they have to make?
I can't give you a number because I'm not a government official.
How far off are they from TPP standards?
Not far off. You'd be surprised. Posen evidence that I read in the beginning of my speech actually clearly indicates that a lot of the issues are just economic policies, the way that they treat their factories and stuff like that.
So what is the connection of TPP and green technology?
TPP allows for a lot of money to be spread across the economy and a lot of technology. If we start sharing ideas and money with China, we are more likely to...
Can you give me examples of past green technologies that have been boosted from TPP?
I can't remember the exact naming of it, but there was actually not a documentary, but a document produced that the White House and China were currently working on a lot of technology, like carbon sequestration, stuff like that.
So on your Posen 14 evidence, it talks about how conflicting signals undermine relations. Wouldn't it be conflicting to have a trade deal like TPP, which was meant to contain China, and suddenly invite China to their own containment?
See, that's the thing, is that's not as dogmatic as you assume it to be. First of all, we had a few officials go to China. John Kerry, I believe his name is. He went to China and said, yeah, China, you're invited to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, we have our Congress and our president saying, no, you are not allowed to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is the conflicting signals that we are presenting within our speech. Now, if we have one of our sides align with what John Kerry said, we can gain a lot of economic benefits while also clearing the confusion that happened between this government official and our president.
Okay, so what spillover do you claim to gain from the TPP deal? That was down 14.
Yeah, it talks about how we can talk about North Korea, climate change, terrorism, and disease. The only reason that we can't currently cooperate over this and start discussing these issues is because we're both mad at each other because of TPP, and China actually doesn't trust us because of TPP. Because of actions that we have done that has excluded China, made it impossible for us to actually be friends with China now.
What interest would China have in TPP?
Well, a few. One, it's 40% of the world's GDP. That is a lot of money flowing around the world that China's probably going to want to bid in. Second of all, issues like North Korea, climate change, terrorism, and disease is affecting everyone. I'm assuming China would want to be brought to the table to be able to discuss these issues, but they need to be assured that TPP won't be a stake between our relations and theirs.
Okay, thank you.
First off, topicality. 1. Interpretation. Economic and diplomatic engagement is managing relations through quid pro quos. Shan 96. Engagement must satisfy 3 conditions. A long-term strategy to encourage change is carried out. Economic and political relationships are established and strengthened, and conditions are placed on the country. 2. Violation. Plan lacks conditions. Fails to make specific conditions with China that are clear within the plan text. 3. Topicality of the voting issue. A. Limits. Allowing diplomatic action without requiring diplomatic conditionality includes talking to China about literally anything, from nuclear weapons to the Black Lives Matter movement. There's 0 conceptual limits to diplomatic area, and the topic of the act is not required to make a demand of China. B. Grab. There's no uniqueness to unconditional dialogue. We talk to China now. The act could be bidirectional, including positive or negative discussions. An open-ended discussion can focus on processes instead of outcomes, meaning the NEC has no conceptual cogency for disathletes, counterplan competition, or even critique ground. Okay, second, engaging China reverses Japan's military restraint and causes rearm. Thing 9. Japan's international stance is not fixed and unchangeable, transforming Japan's long-held self-restraint into defense thinking. The constructive U.S.-China relationship calls into question the U.S. commitment to protect Japan. There's a remarkable tendency in Tokyo to see U.S. efforts to engage China as detrimental to China. Many Japan aligned with the Liberal Democratic Party, mistakenly interprets efforts to engage China as hostile. At least the mainline neglect of their own countries shake up alliance politics and promote Tokyo to embark on significant rearming processes. And U.S.-China co-op takes U.S.-Japan alliance credibility. The impact is Japanese pro-lift, White 13. In other words, the better U.S. and China get on, the less secure Japan feels. It would have to build nuclear forces. Maintaining the alliance with Japan might preclude a stable and peaceful U.S. relationship with China. And Japan pro-lift causes world war, draws in major powers, accidental nuclear conflict is uniquely likely, Mon 16. A move by either country to nuclear weapons would undoubtedly be used as justification by North Korea to expand its own nuclear arsenal to improve its ballistic missiles. Such a move could spark an arms race in the region of two countries try to achieve parity with each other. China. A nuclear-armed Japan and South Korea would risk global security with almost no upside. A renewed effort to build nuclear weapons on the part of either Tokyo or both would signal that the U.S. alliance system is broken, moving China to either offer its own nuclear umbrella to other U.S. allies in Asia or sabotage efforts by other allies to develop their own nuclear arsenal. Not the case. Continue. Inviting China and other attaining standards to effectively locking China out hurts relations because it looks like the U.S. is shifting the goalposts. Edson 15. U.S. standard of joining TP poses severe barriers to China participation. It is stating that the tiger is welcome as soon as he changes his spots. It seems unhelpful to repeatedly urge China to join and then make it more difficult. China more won't go nuclear. Farwell 15. Stability in U.S.-China relationships are optimistic. Strategies see low risk of nuclear escalation. Stakes in U.S.-China conflict would be low. Neither state would risk nuclear escalation. U.S. conventional superiority in China, no first-use policy prevent nuclear threats. And no impact to economic decline. Preferred new data. Denzer 14. Crisis would lead states to use force. The aggregated data suggests otherwise. Average level of peacefulness in 2012 is the same as 2007. Interstate violence declining, as had military expenditures. Studies confirm recession in the triggered violent conflict. Crisis is not generated on nationalism or ethnic exclusion. And now into solvency. Can't solve perception with advantages. China couldn't say yes to TPP timetables, Ramsey 413. Following a specific TPP schedule would be seen as the U.S. de-escalating reforms of China. China has always reformed using its own timetable for a country, establishing its legitimacy, and it has to write its own future. The rules of TPP may not fit the current state of the Chinese economy. Thank you.
First question. So you talk about like how Japan's going to get mad if we start working with China, correct?
Yeah.
So I guess I have a few questions on that. One, don't we already work with China?
The problem is if we increase our engagement with China, it looks like we're abandoning Japan. It was in my cards. Did you read them?
Yeah, I read them, and all of them are like, if we start trade deals with China, Japan will feel bad. But shouldn't Japan feel bad right now, given that half the things in this room are made in China?
No, the fact that we're like going out to have China be part of TPP without even talking to them, right? And they're part of TPP makes it look like we're abandoning them.
All right. I guess I'll move on to your second piece of evidence then, that says rivalry between Washington and Beijing would be disastrous for Japan, but so too would friendship and cooperation. So, first of all, doesn't that mean that we should already be seeing if what you're saying is true, if Japan is going to go nuclear, we already have a rivalry with China. Why hasn't this set off any proliferation?
As I said, the key word that you keep on ignoring is increasing that part of trade.
Yes, but it says rivalry between Washington and Beijing would be disastrous. So if this piece of evidence is true, and as our 1AC has already presented that there is a rivalry, why are we not seeing nukes flying in our faces?
Because there is no increase in this. It's not like Japan is going to be like, let's proliferate right now. But as the scenario is it if it increases, then it's going to proliferate.
Does Japan have nukes?
I'm not a Japan person, but I'm gonna say yes.
You're gonna say yes, so that means that proliferation means that they're you say that there's going to be an arms race, but if they've already built the arms, why hasn't it happened yet?
Because, as I said before, an increase will make it happen. Japan and the U.S. already have a good alliance.
So there's not enough nukes to start an arms race? So you're saying I need 6 nukes instead of 5 to start an arms race with another country?
We have enough.
Okay,
And so
then let's move on to that arms race. So this is talking about if South Korea and Japan got into a conflict, if Seoul and Tokyo got into a conflict, Where does that actually apply to China or the US? I can read like a line of it. By moving towards nuclear weapons development, South Korea, Japan, or any other US ally in the region would violate numerous international non-proliferation acts. It also talks about a nuclear-armed Japan or South Korea would risk global security with almost no upside. Where is there going to be a South Korea and Japan war that triggers this impact?
The part of the card states, like, what our point with this card actually is that it draws in major powers to where the U.S. and China can have difficulties.
Yeah, okay, it draws in
those
major
issues
powers.
itself
It draws
can-
in.
And our increase with working with China causes this issue even more.
Okay, that's my time.
Is anybody not ready? Awesome. First of all, let's go over the advantage that the affirmative team has brought up. I'd like to overview, just to refer the audience to the evidence we've already read. The United States federal government should invite China to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership for three main reasons. One, the partnership allows for expanding relations between the USFG and the People's Republic of China, because they'll be working together to solve global issues like global warming. This prevents war between the two countries. And two, the partnership advances anti-global warming technology and research. We can adopt strategies for advancing carbon emissions, but only by working together. And three, China wants to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership because they wish to increase relations instead of continuing main hostilities that only cause exclusion and containment. Now I'd like to get on to the specific cards D1 and C has read. First of all, they read an Enzomi card, which is talking about conflicting signals undermining relations. I have two answers to this. One, the only way to solve for conflicting signals is with the plan. We allow for clear communication within the United States federal government and the People's Republic of China. And two, all harms of shifting goalposts are solved by the language of the plan. The United States federal government will make clear that China does meet standards currently and will be accepted to join. Also, now onto the Farewell card they talked about, which was China and US war won't go nuclear. There's three reasons it will. A, conflicting signals from officials prevent accurate communication, which is the only warrant in our evidence for why conflict doesn't escalate. And B, revised first strike policies making miscalculation more likely. The world has become more aggressive in the last 2 years, which our evidence doesn't take into account. And C, containment makes the percentage chance of lash out more likely. Only solving for the conflicting signals prevent escalation of future conflicts. These warrants are referring to the Straits times 2K card from the 1AC. Also, they randomly mentioned an economic decline impact card. We didn't talk about economic decline. Ignore that card. Now to the warming scenario. They conceded the entirety of our warming scenario, which means you must believe inviting China to the TPP solves for the entirety of global warming, giving us an entire impact. Now to solvency. We solve in two different ways. One, perception. Just inviting China allows them to feel included and removes the idea that the USFG is shifting goalposts. And two, China actually saying yes. This allows for negotiations to take place on green technology that can be used to solve for global warming. These warrants are referred in our Zhao card. Now to the topicality violation. One, we meet their definition. Our plan has a condition of China responding to be invited to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And two, counterinterpretation. Engagement attempts to collaborate with the target state. That's by Resnick in 2001. Define engagement as the attempt to influence the behavior of a target state through comprehensive establishment and enhancement of contacts. This avoids the pitfalls of prevailing scholarly conceptions of engagement. It considers means rather than ends, does not delimit, encompasses contacts in multiple issue areas, allows for multiple objectives, and permits positive sanctions. And three, prefer interpretation. Limits. We allow the most accessible limits. It proves intention to collaborate is influential to create educational apps. B, ground. Disadvantages are based upon attempting to collaborate with China. Appeasement, politics, and China say no arguments. And four, default to reasonability. Good is good enough. Their interpretation limits out every app on the topic. Now onto the disadvantages they brought up. One, US-Japan relations are resilient and sustainable. New guidelines ensure a common vision, integrated operations, and reciprocal benefits. That's by Sullivan in 2015. New US-Japan guidelines address issues, the alliance's broader scope and expanded provision for Japanese support and integration with US operations. A new bilateral planning mechanism seeks to enhance long-term resilience by making sure the alliance's military edge doesn't have an expiration date. This set of common purpose lends the alliance a durability that makes a crisis unlikely to dislodge each nation from the other. The revitalized alliance is making the US position in Asia resilient. And two, no link. Japan no longer views China as an enemy. That's by Norman in 2015. Abe said he wanted candid discussions at all levels with his country's neighbor. Mr. Abe said Japan and China need to work together to strengthen ties. Already we have gone through several rounds of summit meetings. And three, their own impact card about Japanese proliferation proves that Japan won't likely even create nuclear weapons. That was the Munoz 2016 evidence that they read in the 1NC. It says it would be highly improbable for Tokyo or Seoul to pursue armed nuclear capabilities. This not only proves that nuclear proliferation won't happen with Japan, it also proves the 1NC was wrong in cross-sex when she said that Japan already has nuclear weapons. Obviously, that isn't true, so therefore, proliferation can't happen until they build nuclear weapons. And 4, Japan won't even go nuclear. It's focused on national security, overseas peacekeeping operations, and disaster relief. That's by METNA in 2016. In Japan, the reply has been a firm no. Japan has generally foregone overt militarization and is focused on providing national security, overseas peacekeeping operations, and disaster relief. The policy is the United States to counter proliferation and curb the expansion of the nuclear club. Japan can rely on America's nuclear arsenal. Nuclear armed Japan is virtually unthinkable and highly undesirable. And 5, even if Japan were to develop nuclear weapons, it obviously wouldn't happen overnight. Japan isn't currently building nukes, according to our last card, so their impact is too far away from the present to have to worry about. Oh yeah, I got you.
Alright, ready, steady. What part of your plan works with warming?
Our plan, well, it's not the specific part of the plan that says, hey, TPP is going to talk all about warming.
Okay.
It's actually improving relations that
how do
immediately
you-
improves climate change
Okay,
solutions.
how do you expect to get these warming impacts if you're not even focused on warming?
We don't need to focus on warming. That's the entirety of our evidence. We have the Dival 15 card within the 1AC that talked about not only the impact of warming, but also that climate or just having improved relations allows for climate change solutions.
Okay, so since just improved relations like allows for these solutions, then do you expect just years of conflict to just go away?
I'm not saying years of conflict are going away. I'm saying that improved U.S.-China relations, especially because we're like the top 2 emitters of carbon, would increase solutions that can occur to solve global warming. And especially because you didn't bring this up in the 1NC, it's kind of weird that you're bringing it up now in cross-ex.
Okay, your Dival 7 card was in 2007. What's the threshold?
This is a warming impact. Warming is not going to happen overnight. We're not saying that warming, we can solve for it right now and that it will happen overnight. We're saying that 20 years from now, warming will literally kill us all, or whatever the time frame will be.
Okay.
Right now, we're speeding
What
up because
happens
we're
if we
increasing our...
already passed that threshold?
Our card doesn't state that we passed the threshold, and you definitely don't have a card that says
That's
we
why
do.
I'm asking, what would happen if we passed
Why
this
is that
threshold?
relevant in this debate? You haven't even brought up any warming evidence or analytics in your 1NC. This debate has been conceded by your Meg, and therefore it immediately goes aft. This debate is kind of like useless right now.
Okay. I don't have anything more to do about it. Okay, go.
Alright, so my order is going to be the Japan Decad and then case in the order of solvency, war, and warming. Everyone good? Alright. First on the Japan Decad. The TPP was meant to keep out China. Other trade deals were not. This is what makes the situation unique. This specific instance is what sparks the outrage from Japan. The US would be going back on its word, would cause backlash. Now onto the links. First they say no link, but China and Japan have a history of conflicts, such as perceived Japanese aggression and in World War II, and Japan's aid in China's modernization. They do, in fact, view each other as enemies. China's economic expansion implicates the US-Japan economic partnership, thus creating a sense of instability. This is Cooper 14. The US and Japan have long given their bilateral economic relationship priority. The bilateral economic relationship was the centerpiece of US and Japanese foreign economic agendas, and Japanese trade strongly influenced the making of overall US trade policy. The relative economic decline of Japan and its economic problems has meant that Japan is not viewed as much as the competitive threat. For Japan, China has emerged both as a major economic competitor and partner in the region requiring more attention. And Japan-China's security contest magnifies the link. They perceive everything through the lens of competition, Kim 10. Trilateral relationship could become the major source of strategic conflict. Difficulties in building trust largely stem from the shifting balance of power resulting from China's rise. Having experienced the fear of abandonment in history from the Nixon shock to President Clinton's Japan passing, Japan continues to harbor fears of being edged out as the closest US ally, as the US proceeds to engage China. Now onto the impacts. First on the economy. Decline in US-Japan economic relations spills over to the global economy, Cooper 14. Economic conditions in the US and Japan have a significant impact on the rest of the world. The US-Japan bilateral economic relationship can influence economic conditions in other countries. Japan and the US, as each other's economic partner, has diminished. This trend is due in part to the rise of China. Leaders from both countries face the challenge of how to manage it. Japan is still struggling to achieve sustained economic recovery, now into nuclear proliferation. They said that Japan wouldn't proliferate, but in times of great stress and the loss of a very powerful ally, that creates irrational decisions. Also, the environment would be taking a significant damage if Japan would choose to rearm. Also, anti-proliferation arguments, are culturally outdated and ignore internal politics. Japan is shifting toward militarization, has the capacity, and is bypassing legal restraints, Planet 15. Japanese society gradually leaving its pacifist and anti-nuclear roots behind. The security alliance with the United States are increasingly crucial. Without them, a nuclear arms race could ensue in East Asia. Japan is becoming increasingly ambivalent about its military restraint. It could build its own in short term. It has a growing defense industry recently freed from export restrictions, mastery over missile technology thanks to its space program, and a reprocessing facility capable of producing enough weapons usable plutonium to fuel more than 1,000 bombs. Also, the time frame is rapid, 6 months, Tech 14. Many experts believe that Japan could produce nuclear weapons within 6 months. Japanese official recently saying the record that Japan already has the technical capability to build a nuclear bomb, and it has since the 1980s. Now on to case solvency. The affirmative is impossible. The US can't just invite other countries to TPP. It has to be approved by every member nation. This is part 15. The agreement was to open a session on terms to be agreed among the parties by APEC, economy, or other state. The TPP will hold its partners to rigorous standards. Countries must take necessary legislative measures to meet the terms defined by current member countries. Also, for the TPP and China, which said it will earnestly study whether to seek entry into the agreement. And the things China wants out of trade aren't covered in TPP, shunting and walling 16. Among China's trade priorities, anti-dumping, countervailing, environmental, and technical barriers are the main obstacles. China's main concerns are security of market access, guaranteed market entry, and eschewing interventions. TPP only focuses on tariff and non-tariff barrier reductions, which are actually not China's main concern on trade. And China has many areas of standards that don't meet TPP requirements. This is Pink 13. There is a huge gap between China and the US on standards. For the US part, the standard should formulate by the enterprises within the industry. For China, the national standard is formulated by the standardization law. China enterprises need to adjust the quality management system, which leads to a 20% up of cost. TPP has a special environment chapter. There is a huge gap with the requirements of TPP and the US. This kind of gap belongs to the problem of institutional mechanisms which cannot be solved. Even if China begins to pursue pre-negotiations now, it might be 2 or 3 years. China is not qualified to be part of TPP negotiation. This evidence proves that perception wouldn't matter because inviting China to the TPP would be useless due to a lack of standards.
So let's talk about the Japan dissent for a minute. I'd like to first reference your economy impact. So your 1NC read a Dresner card on our case that was talking about economic decline doesn't have any impact, and then you read economic impact card. I'm really confused. Does economic decline have an impact or not?
It does.
How? And how does that
Cooper 14 card.
How does that refute? What about the Dresner?
The Dresner 14 card is generic at best, and then Cooper 14 highlights a specific instance of economic decline due to Japan's betrayal, or U.S. betrayal of Japan.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So has Japan already rearmed with nukes? I'm going to go ahead and ask you that question
No.
one more time. No, they
But
haven't.
they have the capability. That's
How
the
quick?
argument we were
How
trying to
quick
make.
can they build the nukes?
6 months. That was what our card said.
Your evidence says they can build nukes.
6
Awesome.
months.
So what evidence do you have for Japan specifically not wanting China in the TPP? What specific
You can
evidence?
just look at history, like Japan and China in World War
What
II.
specific evidence? What would make Japan not want China to increase the effect?
Their
the effectiveness?
competition, the fact that they're competing with each other at every moment. Like, I don't need a specific card to tell you.
But they're not.
competing
How,
with each
how
other.
would they be competing in the TPP when they're working together?
Because TPP is all about money.
TPP
And if
is all
China
about
is
improving the
gaining more
economy.
money,
How
then
is-
obviously Japan is viewing that as a threat.
Sure. Okay. So I'd like to reference on case you had a Ping 13 card. It
Yes.
talked about how China doesn't meet the standards. This is from 2013. Do you have a little bit more updated evidence about the standards that China doesn't meet?
No, but unless you have a card that says like, yo, they're great in 2017, then that doesn't really matter.
What about the references that my partner made in the 1AC cross-ex that talked about how China has improved its standards since 2013, especially in the area of climate change.
Enough for it to join TPP now? I don't think
That's
so.
what we stated, and that's what the evidence, like, especially I believe it was
saying that it can join right now if it wanted to.
and also that how would you react to saying that our plan automatically indicates that they meet standards? How is this card still relevant?
What do you mean?
Our plan says China, we'll make clear that China can meet standards. They automatically
You can
meet
encourage
standards.
China to meet. You can encourage China to meet the standards. It doesn't mean they will.
No, we're
Just
not
like our
encouraging them. We're
concept.
saying China meets the standards.
It doesn't though.
It does.
Agree
We
with
are
you.
saying within the application of our plan, we are saying China already meets the standards. They are accepted to join. They can physically
It
join.
doesn't. Even if they did meet the standards, all countries would have to say yes. That includes Japan. Japan would most likely say no.
Okay.
So.
Well then, I think I'm good.
Ready? First off, they stated that they met that they meet our definition because they put conditions on China by responding. Their plan states that they encourage China to respond. One, that's not a condition. Two, like a condition in order for like China to do something instead of just being like, hey, you can respond, but like it's up to you. And their counter-interpretation states that engagement is an attempt to influence political behavior of a target state through a comprehensive establishment and enhancement of context. They do not have a comprehensive establishment, and they don't have an enhancement of context. Their plan does not define any of these terms. It just says, hey, let's invite China to TPP. They have no idea how they would do that. What else? So, in other words, they don't meet their own definition. And three, they say that they should prefer their definition because it's better for education and educational debate, but then they go and list generic disads, plus state that we get a yes or no debate. A yes or no debate is not educational. Like if China's going to say yes or if China's going to say no, that's not educational. So they can't claim to have an education through that debate because just me coming up here and saying like they're going to say yes and then coming up to say that they're going to say no is not educational. 4, ground. The problem is that you explode the ground to where we need an infinite amount of prep time. Plus, say no and yes debates is not educational, as I said before. 5, we do not limit every app. We limit the app like yours that state you can do anything with China and solve. As I said before, they could talk about anything. The Black Lives Matters movement to Jaden's hair. Literally anything. And then they solve. Because they're just inviting China to this open discussion, apparently. That is what they say through their plan. So even if like they are topical, their plan is so generic that they don't even get solvency at this point. So as I said before, like topicality is a voter, and the reason why you should vote for it is for education. If they come up with a better plan, we can debate about who's going over to China or like how the plan is going to be implemented in ways that like actually work instead of them coming up saying with this generic plan text to where they can get access to different advantages. So we don't have like time to respond. That's like not educational. Educational debate is talking about how the plan functions and how we should go through with it. Am I missing anything else? Nope, I'm good. You want for your 1 hour?
Be case in the order of solvency, and then containment or warming, and then the disadvantage, and then topicality. Oh, forgot that. Is anybody not ready? Okay, we'll start with solvency. First of all, I'm just going to go down the list of arguments that they made. So first, they say that we can't just invite China willy-nilly. We need the acceptance of a bunch of other countries. Well, a bunch of countries actually follow the U.S.'s lead in terms of the TPP. You can look at Japan because they're such an ally. You can look at Australia. There's and a lot of the Southeast Asian area. All of those people follow the U.S.'s lead. So if U.S. is like China is cool, other countries will be likely to follow that. Second of all, they say that China doesn't get like the things that they want from the Trans-Pacific Partnership. One, that doesn't mean that they don't want to do this deal. TPP is 40% of the world's economy. Even if this isn't the deal that satiates China's need, this evidence doesn't prove that China won't join. Like, if it was a question of satiating China's needs, none of our other trade deals would have passed. But obviously, they have. Next, they say that China doesn't meet TPP standards. Well, our opposing evidence from the first speech says that the point of inviting them is to allow them to meet the standards of Trans-Pacific Partnership. Of course, they can't amend themselves to the Trans-Pacific Partnership rules because they aren't a part of it. They aren't enforced on China. And then finally, they said that China can't meet standards. The perception is important to show China that we are not making an enemy of them. Instead, we are trying to create an ally of them. As long as China comes to the negotiating table over Trans-Pacific Partnership, we will be able to discuss other big issues like warming, terrorism, North Korea, disease, and more. That's our Zhou 14 evidence. On to war. They did not answer this impact. We are saying that China will get mad and begin to lash out at us. There were 3 different ways that this could happen. Through miscalculation. China will hit the red button accidentally because they were mad one day. The second thing is lash out. They will get angry enough because we are containing them. We are weakening them on purpose, and they get mad over that. And third of all is just excluding them in general, leaving them out. They have heightened paranoia and a heightened sense of needing to attack. So all of those impacts were conceded, and you should be voting for the affirmative off of that. Also on warming, yeah, they also didn't bring up warming at all. We need China because along with the US, they are one of the top emitting countries in the world. If China and the US come together on this major issues, other countries will bandwagon and we can finally end climate change. It will eliminate life on this planet if we don't. On to the disadvantage. So first, they talk about how, all these links. They first talk about how China and Japan are mad at each other. This doesn't make sense because this implies that all of our trade deals with China made Japan mad. They haven't proven a level of cooperation that makes Japan mad. So until they can prove to you why Japan will be uniquely mad about Trans-Pacific Partnership, they have no evidence proving this. We are instead saying that Japan follows the US's lead. They can't win this. On to topicality. First of all, we win here. They did not answer reasonability. For those that don't know what that means, we are close to the topic. Obviously, we are having a US policy engage with China, at least to attempt to engage. They haven't proven to you why that is bad, so you can immediately defer to that when you make your decision. Thank you.
And then case in the order of solvency, war, and then warning. What this debate comes down to is the risks that are associated with the affirmative plan. Japan and China have a long history of conflicts, including World War II and China's modernization, which has caused increase in competition. But right now is the turning point for action. With hotspots in Asia, we cannot risk nuclear retaliation. Now onto the reasons why a TPP invitation would cause instability. Our Cooper evidence notes that the US-Japan alliance is predicated off of national security and trust that Japan will remain a critical ally. But a rise in competition from China leaves a bad impression. And our Kim evidence proves that a trilateral relationship between Japan, the US, and China will trigger major trust issues due to China's power rise. Japan doesn't want to be edged out as the US's closest ally, thus Japan will view an invitation to China as an immediate threat, causing them to defend themselves through the use of nuclear weapons, which is why we must avoid the perception of a US-China get-together at all costs. Here's what will happen if we implement the plan. First, the economy will face a major downfall if Japan feels betrayed by the TPP invitation. The US and Japan alliance accounts for 30% of the world's domestic product and has the ability to change the economic situation in other regions of the world. Both policy leaders face a challenge to maintain this lucrative alliance if it becomes threatened by other competitors. Failure to maintain this economic partnership would cause a massive spillover effect. This was our Cooper evidence. Second, protection of Japan is crucial in order to preserve trust. A China-US alliance calls into question this protection, which causes Tokyo to go on the defense. This was the Fang evidence. Third, Japanese proliferation and the use of nuclear weapons would cause surrounding areas like North Korea to advance their arsenals. Other major powers, for example, like Russia, would have to make split-second decisions about actions well. Even a perception of Japanese defense and offensive action due to a crumbling US alliance leads to great power war. Even a risk of economic decline and nuclear war means you vote for the negative team. Also, as I explained in my 2MC, this is a unique situation because TPP was created to exclude China. So inviting China to a deal that was meant to exclude them goes back on US's word and makes Japan feel like they are ready to invite China in on everything. Now on to case. First on solvency. The affirmative plan has not taken into consideration that the US cannot just invite China to the TPP whenever it wants. Each member country has its own domestic process for approving new TPP countries. This was our part evidence. Not every country is going to follow, considering that Japan would have to say yes, and they're on bad terms with China, World War II, China modernization, etc. Also, they keep mentioning how just a perception solves, but perception doesn't matter if China doesn't have any interest in joining in the first place. TPP only focuses on tariff and non-tariff barrier reductions, which are actually not China's main concern on trade. This was our Shandling evidence. Lastly, TPP standards are too high for China to meet. Even if they wanted to join, they couldn't, and the plan does nothing to fix that. Thank you.
And then solvency, and then I'll be going over the disadvantage. Is anybody not ready? Awesome. Audience, the debate comes down to the advantages of the plan outweighing the harms the negative team has brought up. The Japan disadvantage they have continually brought up is unlikely to occur and will not outweigh the good actions of the plan that they have continually conceded ever since the 1NC. There are two reasons to vote affirmative. One, we have a risk of solving for global warming, a world threat, and solving for nuclear war between China and the US. That's via communication and non-exclusion. And two, the Japan disadvantage is illogical at best and a complete fallacy at worst. Japan proliferation, their impact, or at least their main impact, has no chance of occurring, mainly because Japan doesn't even have nuclear weapons right now. Their impact would take months to occur, making our advantages more of a priority. First, I'll begin with the case arguments on the advantage. Our war scenario relates to improving United States federal government and People's Republic of China relations, which can only be solved for by inviting and not leaving China out of 40% of the world economy. The current function of the TPP don't matter. What matters is the function of the plan and what it does. We invite China, make sure they meet standards within the plan according to our Posen evidence, and allow less exclusion to prevent nuclear war. If we continue to exclude them, our relations will continue to decline and easily escalate to nuclear weapons and nuclear war. This can either happen via China attacking us, or even miscalculation, which is more likely to occur when relations are down. They conceded this entire scenario in their last speech, meaning you should give this full weight and vote affirmative immediately. And also, they have continually conceded our warming impact. Relations being improved allows more climate change solutions worldwide. The negative has never referred to this in their speeches, proving we gain, once again, a separate impact with full weight. Now to solvency. We solved with perception and acceptance of the invitation. The negative has conceded topicality, proving that we have the ability to solve for perception. China doesn't need to meet standards. As I said before, the Posen evidence proves that they will meet standards when we have already invited them. Then they will have the ability to meet standards because right now they might not even know what the standards are. Also, China does want to join the TPP. As stated before, TPP involves 40% of the world economy, which China will want to be a part of in order to improve their influence around the world. Also, they don't want to seem excluded because then, once again, US and China relations decline. Now to the disadvantage. Our plan doesn't cause declining relations between US and China. China and Japan are cool right now. They aren't enemies, and the plan doesn't cause them to hate each other, especially because the negative has never brought up specific evidence saying that the TPP causes China and Japan to have decreased relations. In fact, Japan would want them to join because then, once again, they improve the economic situation. Now to the impacts. Their economic impact is silly. They read an economic impact doesn't happen in their 1NC and then contradicted themselves. Don't believe this, they spent very little time on it. And also, their proliferation impact won't happen for 3 reasons. One, Japan doesn't have nuclear weapons right now. This was their Munoz evidence. It would take 6 months, and there are no warrants for how countries would nuke each other and how that would lead to war. If you don't know exactly how it would happen, then you can't vote on it. Thank you.